This is Star Trek Enterprise Fusion. And if you haven't seen a creepy character, it is clearly this guy. Let's get into the review. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and tell me what you thought about this episode, which is I want to say, unique one. The Enterprise is out. There's a really cute little scene at the beginning of the episode where Archer holds up a science book he had when he was a kid, and it's the Crab Nebula, I believe, and they're at the Crab Nebula, and is a cute little, he has Admiral Johnny Archer in there, and T'Pol, and he sort of says, I have high hopes. Really cute little scene. Then they're hailed by a Vulcan ship. Well, we learn it's a Vulcan ship. It's a little cargo ship called the Vauntless. And the captain is friendly, which weirds Archer out. And that is the mystery of the episode. It literally goes into the title sequence with, this Vulcan's a bit friendly. Watch ahead. Now, this is one of the things that I find funny, especially with Enterprise, is building up to the title sequence means you have to keep your audience there for the title sequence. Maybe friendly Vulcans isn't that intriguing. The episode itself is very, very simple. The Vulcans need help with fixing their ship, and Enterprise needs help scanning the nebula. So they're joined together. We get to see the strut thing that connects the two ships, which I love. I do something Discovery as well. I like that mode of ships being connected. So while they're doing this, obviously T'Pol and Archer have a meal with the Vulcan captain, and they figure out that these Vulcans explore their emotions and try and integrate logic with their emotions. The captain eats meat. The reason I'm not mentioning the captain's name, he does not matter. He appears in like 2 scenes, and then he's gone. We are introduced to immediately a guy who kind of reminds me of Tobey Maguire. I think it's the way his mouth moves or something. Is Talaris. And he takes an instant interest in T'Pol. T'Pol gets assigned to help the Vulcans with their study, with their findings in their study, and he sort of instigates conversation with her where sort of he learns that she likes mint tea, which he finds very strong. He sort of pushes her to sort of not be so judgmental of their teachings. Now, we're also introduced to Tav, who is I reckon a precursor to Doug from Strange New Worlds, because he's very curious and he's very open about his human stuff, or his emotions and his feelings and Vulcan stuff, and he makes a quick friendship with Trip. My favorite scenes in this are Trip and Tav having a talk. And having a talk about things like Vulcan sex, or having a talk about humanity in general. I can taste Doug in this. I doubt that they're even connected, but even they kind of look alike. Talaris is essentially sort of talking to T'Pol, and they're having discussions about emotions. He talks about how she's with humans and how she has humor and she acts a bit more human than most Vulcans. Her emotions are closer to the surface. And he sort of hints, maybe you shouldn't meditate tonight and see what the dreams are like. T'Pol does this. Now, the dream is a dark human alley, and she goes in, just jazz music playing, jazz. And she goes into a jazz club and she listens to jazz. You can feel it. Intercut with her getting intimate with Talaris. Now, this is the first inclination that there's some sort of sexual thing. We also see a figure of Sarek from the Vulcan ship collapsing onto the floor. Obviously, her mental walls breaking down. Some sort of symbolism. Now, she wakes up from the dream uncomfortable, a little bit sort of out of it. She goes to sick bay, and he says, "Oh, you have some problems in your brain. Everything seems a little bit overstimulated," and she knows what it is. And she gets some epinephrine from drugs, which is meant to calm her down. When T'Pol goes back to the ship, she's immediately questioned by Talaris on what the nature of her dream was. And she doesn't want to talk about it first. She doesn't want to express her emotions about the dream. So she sort of pushes it away. And we notice in this scene that Talaris gets a little bit, I want to say, pushy with how he's in the motions. Can I point out, he's creepy the whole way through. Like from beginning to end, creepy. And he's pushing her, and he sort of, I want to say, gives off this predator vibe. She does start expressing it, and she goes, the dream was about a memory. So the jazz club and T'Pol on Earth is a real thing. She left the compound of the Vulcans to go and explore. She heard the music and was drawn to it. I love that they chose jazz. I think Star Trek's never going to use contemporary music. If she walked in and Britney Spears was playing, I'd be very, very surprised. I think it would be more interesting, or like some sort of weird pop thing or a techno thing, and she's sort of like drawn to it. That would make more sense. Her at a nightclub would kind of make more sense, in that it sort of, a nightclub, I would say, the music in a jazz club represents humanity, but I think a nightclub perfectly encapsulates humanity, its trials, triumphs, horribleness, and horrible music. But it's a memory of her going into this club, and he suggests that they try I want to say, old Vulcan technique. When we go to Talv and Trip, Archer receives a message from Admiral Armstrong about is it Admiral Armstrong? Or am I just confused? It's Vaughn Armstrong, the actor. So he informs Captain Archer that Talv's father is dying and wants to communicate with his son. Archer communicates this to Talv, and Talv is like, I don't give a shit. We said goodbye years ago. So Archer enlists Trip to help convince him, or at least try and get him to talk to his father, because I imagine Archer kind of wants the brownie points with the Vulcans, because, you know, they always want brownie points. And also the Vulcans have been spying on them again, which is interesting. Trip embarks on sort of talking to Talv about sort of, should he? Talv doesn't want to. He doesn't care. He doesn't want to listen. And then Trip tells him the story of how he didn't ask a girl out. It doesn't seem very connected, and he's regretted it for 20 years. And he sort of hints at him. I want to point out in this episode, I don't know whether it's the first time in the first season where we've really spent a lot of time sort of wandering around engineering, but engineering looks brilliant. We have like just every part of the NX-01's engineering, that whole bigger warp core, it being slanted, it having sort of buttons everywhere. The only stupid thing was when they're on the second level, there is 30 million lights running on the wall, and these aren't walls with computer panels on them. These are just walls with, I think there's a couple of computer panels on a couple of the panels, but there is like 20 lights above his head. And and other than it might look cool lighting wise, if you're recording it, it seems a little bit like a waste of light bulbs. That's what I feel anyway. Talaris and T'Pol sitting in the quarters, and it's all good. They're cross-legged. They're ready there. He's talking about how he's going to go into her mind. It's an intimate connection. They can just do like a sort of dream walkthrough or something like that, but a mind meld would be better. So he begins his mind meld. And already when he tries to connect to her, he is, I want to say, he is physically enjoying that, trying to connect that and to connect. T'Pol sort of shies away. She doesn't want to. She's like, oh, it's not working. And he's like, no, you're not letting go. So T'Pol sort of tries to let go, and he goes back to his mind meld. And he sits there, and she shows him the dream, and he's sort of guiding her through this mind meld until they get to the jazz club, and he sort of pressures her for the emotion she felt, the fear of getting caught, the excitement at the risk. He sort of goes there, and T'Pol's not comfortable, and you can see from what he's talking about, he's, for lack of a better word, getting horny over it. He's very, it reminds me of the scene from Star Trek 6 where Spock's doing Valaris, But the difference being is that Spock wasn't enjoying that. It was clear. This guy's enjoying the mind meld. And Spock, and T'Pol says no and stop, and he doesn't. No, I'm going to kick. And it's a violation of her consent. And essentially a mind rape. And it's a big scene, and it does have implications down the line, I know that. But it was so really, really well acted. I wish they did make Talaris less of an obvious creep, but Jolene Blalock is given some interesting things. So Talaris sort of gets a bit forceful with her, a bit uncomfortable, and she collapses on the floor, and she sort of crawls and calls sickbay. She's taken to sickbay, and then we cut to a scene of Talaris entering Captain Archer's office, and Archer plays it cool. He wants to, I gather, sort of give him a false sense of security. He talks about the scans they're doing, the mission they're doing, how he's enjoying being on the ship. Talaris goes to leave, and he says, T'Pol won't be joining you today. And he's like, why? Why would she not be joining me? Because you crazy mofo. You can see that Archer he's going, you did something called a mind meld and it hurt her, and she said no. And Archer immediately comes to the you should be able to do it. And he's trying to egg him on. He's like, you cannot see T'Pol. It is not happening. You stay away from sickbay. And you see Talaris' anger grow and grow until eventually he grabs Archer and throws him across the fucking room. And Archer has a phaser strategically behind the desk. Does he always have it there? And he points it at him, and Talaris goes, you planned this. And Archer's like, I didn't plan to be thrown across the room, but yes. And he has a temper. And Archer points out, he goes, you definitely have a temper. And then that desperation to see T'Pol, clearly sort of a predator. And Archer says, you need to get off my ship. Now, Tove, or Cove, and Trip are walking down the corridor. Trip's telling him, you got to look after this, you got to look after this, we're going to make sure you do this, because otherwise you're going to go to shit. And Cove points out that he contacted his daddy. We find out that his father is going to live a bit longer, and he found the news out from his father, and Trip's very happy that he did this. Now, before we get into some serious discussion, I think Cove and Trip's relationship is really, they have great chemistry. The way they talk to each other, the guy who plays Cove is genuinely just an enjoyable character to watch. As I said, gives Doug vibes, but not to the extreme of sort of being outwardly comical. Just sort of comedy is in the situation of Trip is very awkward and Tove is very honest. That relationship I love. It's genuinely just like a fun little moments, like in the canteen, in the mess hall, where they're talking and Trip wants to ask about Vulcan mating, Vulcan sex, and he goes, oh, you want to discuss sex? And everyone goes quiet. Like it genuinely, it's like just a funny moment from the obliviousness to the awkwardness. That's really fun. I think it's a good way to do sort of Vulcan humor. And on the darker side of this episode, which is it's an abuse story, it's an assault story. T'Pol, and I wish that we hadn't had so much T'Pol, I want to say, T'Pol sexualization. So throughout this season, and at every opportunity, every male crew member, I'm pretty sure, other than Travis, has expressed some sort of sexual attraction to T'Pol. And I don't think that's a problem. And they also imply that Archer likes T'Pol more than he likes Tom. But well, that's a story for another day. And those sexualizations most of the time, for no other reason than Jolene Blalock is an attractive woman. No other reason. So when we get to this episode and we have a character who is actively pursuing her, manipulating her, and then assaults her, it feels a little bit like that sexualization like a step up, a step across from that sexualization. I don't know how to describe it. If you're going to just gratuitously sexualize an attractive woman and then put in a rape story, I feel like you're playing devil's advocate for no... I can't explain it. It feels weird to me. It feels weird that... T'Pol is a great character. She has an interest in humans. Like, we learn a ton of stuff about T'Pol in this. She has an interest in humans. She's always been a little bit more emotional than the Vulcans. She's much more into exploring humanity than most other Vulcans. So we learn a lot of really great stuff about her. But then she gets immediately put in a victim situation. And in Archer's stead, as soon as he hears about it, he calls this guy and gets them the fuck off the ship. I don't know why he had to prove that this guy had a temper. You know what I mean? Like, I suppose in the modern era, if someone says they're assaulted, you go get the fuck out or you call the police. But in this, he sort of says this is what happened, and Talaris sort of implies this is a choice she made, and she made all these decisions. But in the modern day, you would go, she's a victim, believe the victim. In this episode, by Archer sort of having to push Talaris to show his temper and to go overboard, almost makes it look like he didn't believe T'Pol, and he just needed to get that final bit of evidence, which I suppose, no, there's no, it just seems a little weird. I don't know what your opinion is on this episode. You may love it, you may hate it. I think it has a lot of good things, but I feel like, A, he's an obvious predator. B, T'Pol has been sexualized the entire season for no reason. And she becomes a victim of an assault, and Archer needs to sort of double check that this guy did something bad. Now, Archer, in Archer's defense, he was like, stay the fuck away from T'Pol. Like, it's an interesting one. I don't think it's necessarily as bad as ignoring T'Pol as a victim. He was very much, stay away from Sickbay. You're not going near her. Complete this alone. Like, he was defending her. But I think it just notches it a little bit in. He should have just been, get the fuck off my ship from the beginning. And not have to prove that this guy had a temper. I don't know. It's a tricky one. It's an interesting one. It's also, I want to say, I know it gets brought up again, so we'll get to that episode. But I do think this is a very interesting in terms of questions it raises about Spock and Valeris, number one, is a thing. But those questions have always been there. Him forcing a mind meld onto her has always been there. Like, how wrong is that? But this is actively probably, I want to say, they always do telepathic assaults, like a Nemesis. I do think that this is handled better than Star Trek Nemesis and a lot of others. I do think that I don't think it's perfect, but I certainly think that it hits most of the right notes in terms of how it's characterized. I don't like the over-sexualization of T'Pol. It's honestly driving me insane at this point. What did you think about this episode of Fusion? Did you enjoy it? Did you hate it? Do you find it fucking wrong? Do you find it fucking disgusting? Anything you want to write in the comments. I'll be back next week for an Enterprise review of the next episode, animated series on Tuesday, and a random video on the weekend.